Hey gang, it is Wednesday, August 16th, and this is Brooklyn Pony Part 10. I know you've been patiently waiting, and I'm glad for that, and I'm sorry it's taken so long to get this thing put together, but I wanted to take my time and make sure everything was right. If you followed along, you know that in the previous series I showed the buildup of everything from the floor pan to the rear section of the car, including wheelhouses, quarters, all those various parts and pieces, and also installation of the outer rocker panels. As you know, I've salvaged some parts from the original car, and a lot of it was the inner seat structure, the rain gutter, the inner structure for the mount points of these panels here, and of course the filler panel in relation to the trunk lid. Now I did also salvage the A-pillars and the windshield frame out of the original car, and in that process I found that the dash was no good. It had rust holes through it, so it wasn't savable, and also the kick panels were no good, so I salvaged those along with the dash out of the donor coupe, and that is what we have here. There's the dash, and I'll have to do a radio repair on that just because the minor cut up of the opening, so I have the patch panel for that. And I did salvage these kick panels and transfer those into the original A-pillar structure. Also did some repair work up here. Some of the metal was rusted away, and so all this will get treated and painted and everything, but just showing you some of the repair work that took place. Also over here, this section and this piece right here. Now these kick panels, they are a little more complicated than just pulling them apart, because this upper part of the windshield frame actually overlaps this part of the panel. So in the process, what I did is I cut a line up here and saved what was underneath this, and then also, if you can see on this other side, I cut down here and removed the original section of the panel, and then I pre-fit this piece, which I salvaged again from the other car, into this location, and then welded it at those locations as well. So that's taken some time. It was a little more effort than I expected, but I wanted to use these original panels because they're in pretty good shape, and it just means more to me to have it as original. And here you can see it still has the stampings in it from the factory. Alright, with that in mind, what I did when I removed the A-pillars, and when I removed them from the coupe, I did some measuring. The difficulty between doing it between the convertible and the coupe was the convertible had issues. The original car was collapsing on itself, so I couldn't get a good measurement. And what I did when I sectioned out the A-pillar pieces, here they are right there, I did some measuring. And I'm going to do some more measuring as I go along, and also test fitting. But basically I used the corner reference of this upper corner here, and I measured down to the mount point, let's say, of the B-pillar, or also the quarter panel. And I got a measurement, and you can see there's my drawing, sticker drawing, and that measurement was 50 5/8 inches from that corner down to that base. On the opposite side of that, I measured up in the corner of the quarter, which is up here, this location, and I measured down to that corner, which is here, of this one, and that measurement was 54 inches. Now, what's significant, I say significant, maybe it's not, the measurements were different from side to side, only a little bit. That's 7/8 on this side, that's 50 9/16. So, not that that's that critical, because these cars didn't have these tight tolerances like a modern car, where they're all measured on with lasers and jigs and everything else. So there are some allowance there. But what I'm going to do, aside from measuring out those dimensions like I just showed you, I will also mount one of the doors, or the doors, on the side. I'll put the hinges on and test fit the door itself to make sure that it lines up and that there's a proper gap, or at least enough room that I can adjust fore and aft. As you know, there's a lot of play in these mounts for the hinges. That's why they have these big holes. But it's critical to me that I have that in the right location, and I have these dimensions, fore and aft, the right dimension. And I will also, I have a friend who has a coupe and also access to another convertible. I will do some more measuring on their cars as well, just to verify, but I'm pretty comfortable with where this is. Also, the kick panel, as you can see, runs on the outside of the rocker. And here you can see the old drill holes. The drill holes from where I had separated everything from the welds. Now, beyond that, once everything is in place, there's a few things that have to happen in a certain sequence. And if any of you were in the military, there's an expression I use, which we used in the military, particularly during testing, that sequence is scored. And what they meant by that was you can do things in a variety of ways, but per the military, they wanted it done in a certain sequence. That's just the way the manual reads, and that's the way the instructions read. So I'm going to show you something here that I think is interesting. I've got to install the front frame rails, and I also have to install the torque boxes, and of course the firewall. Now you'll notice the firewall is not sitting flush, and it can't sit flush. The reason for that is this is a universal fit kind of firewall. Even though this is a dynacorn part, they're not made specific. This is made to fit either a coupe or a convertible, and so you can see the width. Hopefully you can see that. I know the lighting's not helping, but this is, you know, 2.5 inches wider because of this inner rocker of the convertible is wider than the coupe. So the panel would fit into a coupe pretty easily. You can also see the gap on the side. And I did a video on this before. Let me show you on that side. Again, there's the overlap. I did a video on this on the light blue Mustang. What I had to do was build angle supports to support the edge of this firewall. They don't give you enough material because there's too much variance in these cars. I could show you, different places where the measurements are going to be different. But to make it simple, they make it basically fit a coupe, and then you modify it to fit the convertible. So I'm going to have to cut that and come up to a certain distance and across and let it slide down inside the inner rocker. So that'll take care of that. Also, because of the sequence of this car, this lower section of the firewall will go underneath the floor pan. And you can see there's a gap right there. They leave that so you can get the floor pan underneath it. Now I will also pre-drill some holes on top so that I can weld those, and then I will drill holes through the top of this pan so that when the firewall is underneath it, I can weld those solid. Okay, that's simple enough, and that can be done. That really is going to have to be done prior to anything else going in. So I'm going to do fitment on that, and then due to the sequence, the torque boxes will have to go, the frame rails will have to go next. The reason for that is the torque boxes have this section underneath here, which is going to weld to the bottom of this floor support. For that to make sense and make it work proper, I need to have the rails in first, because I need to weld through the sides of this floor support. So this direction, and obviously this direction, but I also need to weld from the bottom. So I'll get the floor supports in place, and then I'll put the rocker or the torque boxes in place. So I'm just trying to point these out to you so that you know you can't just jump ahead. If you put the torque box in first, you're not going to be able to weld in the floor support properly. The frame rail properly. And you can't put the frame rails in before the firewall, because you can't get the firewall in with the structure of the back structure here of the frame rail. Or at least you can't get it in properly. You can put it on top, which I've done, because I was limited on the light blue Mustang years ago. I could not modify it to fit, you know, underneath, slip it underneath the floor pan because the frame rail was in place. Hope that makes sense. I'm just trying to clarify so that, you know, when you're on these projects, take your time and have a look at what you're working on and just identify, you know, these situations. Now beyond that, I also have the cowl, upper and lower half, and I've already test fitted them to the repair work that I've done on the windshield frame, and everything fits very nice, so I'm happy with that. My next step is going to be doing a final fitment on the A-pillar windshield frame structure, getting those welded in, and then working towards getting the firewall to fit properly. Alright, so I feel like I'm making some progress. I've been doing measuring and cross measuring and fitting, and I've had the door on here, and I did go measure those other cars, and I'm confident with the measurements that I have, and I've measured from a variety of places. I'm using, let's say, this reference here for the fender mount, and I know that can be manipulated and bent slightly, but the base of it is pretty close. I've measured there to, say, back in this area, and even, you know, from here up to the inside of this corner. I've measured from that flange that is part of the dynacorn structure of the floor pan, and they all have that again to up here in this corner. I've done a bunch of things, and I'm really happy with the results. I even put the top on to verify that it fit the windshield frame, and so I'm really happy with all that. But I'm not ready to weld just yet. I'm still doing fitment, and I will continue to do fitment until I'm 100% satisfied. But I wanted to show you this. I'm going to work on fitting the firewall, and hopefully the light doesn't affect us too much here. As I said before, this firewall is wider than the convertible floor pan, so it's going to have to be trimmed. And I just did some simple things here. I took, in this case, just took a block of wood, set it up underneath here, and just use it as a guide to draw a straight line. Now this line from this lower flat section over is going to go away, because that actually goes underneath the pan, and it'll cause a problem if I try to fit around the rocker. I hope that makes sense. I could probably do it if I came in from the front, but then I have other flanges to deal with. It may work. I may leave it for the moment, but I'm just trying to point out some things. I drew basically a straight line up, and I took a framing square and I set it inside of the in between the firewall and, let's say, the kick panel. But I had done also done a drop measurement from the top of the rocker down to the floor pan, and if I remember correctly, well, it was 3 7/8. That was a drop from here to here. So I just used my framing square, pushed it in until I got a measurement of 3 7/8, and drew a line. So that gave me the height, because you're not going to be at a square. This being that the firewall is at an angle, you have to compensate for that. So obviously this length, if you cut it, you know, by this measurement, it's like, you know, 6 inches or whatever. So anyway, I drew that line, and then I took my 1/2 inch scale, laid it inside, and drew a second line. And the reason for that is I'm going to create a flange. So I will have a cut line here, here, and here, and then I will cut here and here, and I will make the decision. I will probably leave most of this here until I cut this off, this whole section over here. And then either way I have to do something here, because I can't, it'll get in the way. Anyway, I can take this section and bend it up, take this piece and bend it up, and this piece and bend it slightly. And that'll give me kind of a pocket that'll sit on top of the inner rocker. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. So I'm going to replicate that on the other side and cut that out, and then I can lower the firewall into place and verify fitment underneath the floor pan, and that's going to help with some of this fitment. Now the other part of that is once I get that down in place, and like I said, I make these firewalls kind of a universal fit. You can see that gap, and that's normal. That's how they're made. They do it on purpose. But once I get that down in, then I can work on creating a new flange out of some leftover material that'll go underneath and then come up and attach to the kick panel and the rest of the rocker. I hope that makes sense, but that's where I'm at right now. Alright, as I'm doing this, I wanted to point out another thing. I made a cardboard template of the pattern of the inner rocker. And what I did is I took a piece of cardboard and I laid it at the same angle as the firewall so that I would have the length to compensate for the angle. Because I wouldn't be doing it straight up and down, it would be at an angle. So that's what this was for. And basically I traced it like that so that I had that pattern, and that's how I got my outside pattern transferred. I don't think I mentioned that before. But at this point I've trimmed out this inner piece, and just for simplicity's sake I'm going to use what they call duckbill pliers. These are used a lot in the aircraft industry, and all I'm going to do, hope you can see this okay. The plan is I want to create flanges. So I'm just gently going to start rolling this up following that line. Once I get it to a certain point, then I'll use my hammer and dolly and get the angle that I really want. And that's going to give me a nice flange. Weld that together. And then I'll probably add some holes, or I may weld it on the edge. I haven't decided yet, but either way, this gives me a flange. And I've already done the driver's side, same way. And I'm going to test fit it and see if this will go underneath this little extra piece. If it will, I'll leave it because that gives me something else to weld to, and it creates or eliminates a gap. Well, I think I'm pretty close. I was able to get it to slide under the rocker, like I said, and it slid underneath the whole front edge of the floor pan. Fits pretty close. And again, it gives me a nice flange to weld. And of course, I'll adjust those as necessary to make a good tight fit. This side, driver's side, is really close. And what I'll do is I'll also set the cowl up here to make sure everything lines up and fits. Now on the passenger side, my measurement may have been just a little bit off. I'll have to adjust that so I can bring it down just a little bit because it's sitting a little bit high on this side. But I think I'm pretty close. I like that. That's a nice easy way to make it fit underneath the floor pan. Alright, I think I'm done for tonight. I did some more trimming and adjusted the fitment on the bottom there. Very happy with that. I also test fitted the cowl, and it's fitting very nice, so I'm happy with that. Everything's dropping in place nice. There's a little bit of a lip on this side panel, and this dropped in behind it like it should. And same thing over here. Now I did set the frame rails in place, and they butted up perfect to the firewall, but I will get to that later. At this point, I'm very close to welding, and I want to do just a few more fitment things to make sure everything's right before I fully commit. You know, it's always important. Can't get in a hurry. If you're going to make it right, take your time. Alright, so I've measured, I've remeasured, I've cross-measured, I've done every kind of measurement I can think of. I had the original door mounted and it fit well. I had the aftermarket door mounted, it fit well. And so I think I'm satisfied, and I'm going to go ahead and weld the A-pillars in place. There's some other things I need to talk about, and part of that is these torque boxes, which I'm confident now that I'm going to have to take those apart in order to get them in correctly. It's just too much overlap with the frame rails to get everything in there as an assembly. I will say this, I did have the firewall fitted around the inner rocker panel, but that's not going to work as well as I'd hoped because of these flanges here on the upper half of the torque box. So again, I'll have to get this in and then adjust the fitment of the firewall or whatever, or make it so that the firewall will have space for these pieces to get in there so I can weld them in. I hope that makes sense. You'll see whenever I get to that point. Basically, I have this too snug where that fits right there, and I'll have to open those up a little bit to allow room for the torque box. So it gets a little complicated. There's a lot of things that have to line up just right. Alright, so as you can see, I hope you can see, I have welded in the A-pillars and the forward lower section of the kick panel, and taking everything else out of the way. Now, I was talking before about the torque boxes and how they were going to be very difficult, or they would be very difficult to try to put in as an assembly. So what I've done is I drilled out the welds on the passenger side, and that was easy enough. They separated nicely. And then, since I had the firewall removed, and the shape of this is supposed to relate to that inner rocker. So if I slide this in and rotate it, it doesn't line up. And the reason for that is it's hitting on this flange for the floor support. So I'm going to have to trim this corner off right there. And then I'll be able to rotate this up and get it more level or plane, in plane with the where the firewall will be. So that's the plan right now. Then I'll just trim off that corner, or somewhat, to make it match the shape of the floor support. And hopefully you can see that I cut off, basically I think it was just excess material for the most part. And so now I can rotate it up and it lines up much better. It'll clear that corner. I may trim just a little bit more off, just a little, just to make sure there's enough room. And you can see there's a gap where that flange rolls back to the floor support. I'm going to reshape that as well. It's a bit round in this corner down here, and so I'm just going to put it on my steel table and use my hammer, my body hammer, and kind of push this flange that direction and try to clean up this corner just a little bit more. Alright, I've said before, everything is like a big puzzle, and I want to point out that I've stressed before about the shortness of this firewall on the edge, and I think what their plan was with this was they wanted it to fit any Mustang that would have had a torque box, ideally. I've talked about it having that gap, and you'd have to make your own flange. I did this on the 65 Mustang a few years ago, and I had to make flanges for this, but it did not have torque boxes. Well, if you look at this torque box, of course, it's got a flange up here, and I want to show you this. I've already made some adjustments to those flanges for the firewall, and I want to take this piece and fit that in, and then I can clamp the firewall where it needs to be. That fits real nice. And same way with the let's say the upper panel of the torque box. So I can clamp that in, and I'll just show you. I think this is looking really good. Like I said, everything's kind of a puzzle, and you got to get the pieces in the right sequence. So that fits really nice. It does have a little bit of an issue down here at the bottom, and I'll work on that a little more to get that to fit the floor support. But otherwise, it fits really well to the inner rocker panel and also to the firewall. And I should note that the firewall fits nice and flush to the kick panels on both sides, like it should. And come inside, and you can see that it lines up real nice on the inside, and that creates the flange to support the firewall. So everything is lining up really well. And at this point, you can see I've marked holes where I'm going to drill into the floor pan, and also to the where it overlaps the upper part of the torque box. I'll drill those holes and a variety of holes around the perimeter so that I can weld all that in. Now again, everything has to go in a sequence. So to me, the main thing is to get the firewall set with the upper panels of the torque boxes. So what I'll do is I will treat the back side of this panel, and I'll probably even apply some paint to the bottom of the firewall so that they interact, and they stay, hopefully stop any potential rust. But I want to take care of those surfaces. And I haven't taken apart the other torque box yet, so I got to take that apart and make it fit as well on the driver's side. So once all that is in place, then I can weld in the firewall and the upper half of the torque boxes all at the same time, and that'll take care of all of that in one shot. Then what I'll do is fit the frame rail, I believe is how my sequence is going to go. And I want to show you this. I've had people mention, how are you going to line up the frame rail and different things. Well, ideally, the way I look at it is, of course, I'll do measuring, to make sure everything is in plane as best as I can. But the angle, or the bottom of the frame rail, is going to sit into the pocket of the floor support. So if you can feel it flatten out when you wiggle it up and down, and you get to a flat point. And then I'm going to push it back. I'm going to show you that, if you can see it from my camera angles good, how well that frame rail fits the firewall. It's completely flush. And so, as you can see, I've also traced out the pattern for the the frame rail. So I will drill holes from the bottom up through the firewall, so that whenever I get everything in place, I can weld the through the firewall to the frame rail. I will drill holes in the side of the floor support on both sides and the bottom, again to attach the frame rail. Once the frame rail is in place, then I can put in the lower half of the torque box and weld it back in. So again, it's a great opportunity to treat all this metal, put some paint on there, and take care of it now, because once it's in, it's in. There's nothing else you can do. Alright, so now I have the passenger side fitted, and it fits pretty nice as well. I may do some fine tuning again down at the bottom, but that may come later. For now, I'm more concerned with how it fits the firewall and also fits the rocker panel. So again, that's pretty nice. I did trace a line around the edge of the upper half of the torque box, and with that I'll be able to drill some holes through the firewall, so that when I put everything in place, I can weld the upper half of the torque box to the firewall. I'll pull everything back apart. I did drill holes across the perimeter of the floor pan and over here in the corner for the flanges. So Still a few holes to drill. And you can see there's my trace line there on that one. But still a few holes to drill. Alright, so like I said, put some paint on the bottom side of the firewall. And I also painted the back side, or the upper half, of the torque boxes. So I'm going to get those in place, and I believe I'm ready to start welding. I did want to mention one more thing. On the upper half of the torque boxes, you can maybe see there, I did drill some holes so that I can weld them to the inner rocker panel directly, and I will probably also do some edge weld. But there's also, let's see, there's a hole on top right there as well. So just a reference. So I'm going to get some welding done. Alright, the firewall is welded to the side panels. The upper half of the torque boxes is welded to the firewall. And the firewall is welded to the floor pan. Everything went in pretty smooth. Really happy with it. You can see my welds on the top half, to the top half of the torque box, and then of course all the welds where everything joins together at the rocker. So still a lot more to do. I will work on getting the dash in and installing the lower and upper halves of the cowl, and I'll also work on getting the frame rails in place along with the lower half of the torque boxes. As I move along, and before I start putting in the frame rails, as I talked about in the previous video, I'm going to take care of this dash. The dash that was in the original convertible had rust through it, so it was no good, and I salvaged the dash from the 66 coupe parts car. So the only thing I really need to do to it at this point is fix this radio opening. Somebody has, of course, cut these up, as happens very often, and so there's a repair patch supplied by Mustangs Unlimited. You can see it's got dynacorn on it as well, but basically this piece is a universal type of piece. Dynacorn doesn't actually make it, I don't believe. I think it's they just put their sticker on it. But anyway, as you can see, what I plan to do is cut out the black line, transfer that to the patch panel, and then work it back in. And the reason I'm doing the dash right now, or first, is because I've already got the firewall in place and the side panels and the B-pillars and all that stuff, but in order to get the cowl in place properly, I need to have the dash in place. I don't want to put the cowl in and then try to force the dash in. I don't think that's the best plan. So as you can see, you've got a couple of flanges here. You've got a flat flange that mates to the top of the dash, and also the upper portion of the cowl mates to that, and then I believe this area, this also mates to the dash. Okay, there's the piece I cut out, and it worked out well to lay it on the back side of the new piece, because there's a little bit of existing material here in these corners that help line things up. There you can see. So now that I've traced it out, I'll cut out that piece and then mock it into the big hole that's in the dash now. Alright, so there I have the piece cut to fit and mocked in place, and as you can see, I've got some C-clamps holding it on each end, and also a clamp holding it in the center. And to me, the most important part is having this, I don't know, joggled area lined up on both sides, and I do, and then it'll adjust a little bit more up here on top as I weld. I can push that up just a little bit and take care of most of that gap, but next step is just to weld it in. So there it is with the initial welding done on it. I did do it in short, sections all the way around. There may be a few little holes left, but what I'll do at this point is sand down all of the high weld and get a better look at it. If I need to re-weld anything, I'll take care of it from there. Well, I think that turned out pretty good. There's one pinhole for sure right there, and just a couple other little spots I might hit, but otherwise maybe just a very light skim of filler just to smooth it up, but I'm happy with that. So I'll fill in that little spot weld and finish blending blending that back down, and then I'll work on getting the dash in place in the car. Alright, so I have the dash set in place and things are lining up really nice, as they should. One thing I did have to repair was the end. I cut off this piece that was right here. I just didn't like the way it looked. It was too thin and just wasn't going to look good. So I remade that piece, and of course I'll put some holes in there so I can weld it to the B-pillar. Up on top here I'll drill some holes through this panel, this little section here, so I can attach it. I'll do the same on the other side, and there will be a weld here at the bottom. And you can see this is the panel from the coupe as the dash is from the coupe, so that little weld right there, that little weld spot lines up really nice. One thing I will point out, and it kind of threw me a little bit, if you look, if I get enough light in here, well, this cutout right here, see that shape? Look at the gap between the lower section cut out for the access to the plate for the door hinge, and look at the gap from there to there. It's about 3 inches or so, and on this side it's like 1.25 inches or 1 inch. Kind of weird. I don't know why they did that. Maybe somebody knows, but I just think it's kind of odd to see stuff like that once in a while, and you wonder what's off, because I was looking at let's say the drop from the hole to the bottom of the dash, and this one actually overlaps the hole. So I thought, man, something's wrong, but no, that's the way they're made. So just an observation. So I'll finish prepping this and get the dash welded in, and then start working on the upper cowl. Alright, the dash is fully welded in. See there in the corners. Also down here at the bottom, very close to what the factory had. And now I'm going to prep the lower half of the cowl, and you can also see that I painted, if I didn't mention before, the back side of the dash, so that shouldn't be any problems down the road. And you can see I have the cowls, they're upper and lower upside down right now, and the reason for that is the back half of the lower cowl, it just comes in right here in front of the dash. It doesn't actually kick up, so it sits right here. And this flange on the upper half is what mates to the dash section. Alright, no big deal there, other than I want to drill holes in the upper half so that I can weld to the lower half. And it's pretty simple, and you could say it's pretty obvious. You got the angle here on this flange, but what I intend to do, as you can see, I've drawn a line along the edge following where the lower half meets the upper, and all that does is give me some verification so that I don't drill slightly off. I know there's plenty of room there, but it's just a simple little thing that you can do to verify where you're at. And I'll set the lower cowl up in place so I can show you what I'm going to do for the drill pattern on that as well. And there's all I'm going to do. Pretty simple, maybe 1.5 inch pattern all the way around, and of course it'll be welded in up here to this upper portion. And then I did joggle this slightly here so that the pattern comes forward just a little bit. It's not going to make much difference. I could have stayed back, but I wanted it closer to that flange, so that's what I did. And if you'll notice, now these are the dynacorn dash, cowl, upper and lower. The line here is pretty consistent across the front, but when it gets over here, it's off just slightly. And also these holes are just a little bit off, and I'm not sure why, because it's a match set. You really can't do much. You can't move. You can grind this down a little bit to move it around, but it has to be centered. Same way over here. This is on. There it is, on the edge where it belongs, and then this gaps away slightly. So what I'll do when I get to that point is I can put a pair of vice grips on here gently and tap on this part of the firewall, and it'll let it come back just a little bit and help take care of some of that gap. I just hate to see it sticking out like that. But again, that's the way the panels are made, and there's just a little bit you can do to remedy that. So that's where it's at. I'll get these holes drilled and get that upper half in place. Alright, as you can see, the lower half of the cowl is welded in place, and I did blend down all the welds. And of course I'll top coat those with the weld through primer before I put the top half on. Prior to that, I'm going to spray Shopline epoxy primer on this interior surface and all around the towers and everything, and then I'll use brushable Eastwood seam sealer and make sure to go around these towers so there's no gaps and everything's nice and tight. And there normally wouldn't be a problem anyway. As you can see, there's a flange internally that kicks up that's supposed to catch any moisture, but if you don't let that moisture in there in the first place, you're further ahead. Now I've already scuffed this with Scotch-Brite prior to the epoxy, and then I'm going to top coat that with some Rust-Oleum. The car is going to be painted back to its original silver blue color, and rather than try to, I know they don't make that color in, say, like Rust-Oleum, but I know Rust-Oleum is a pretty tough product. That'll take care of it, and it'll be nice and solid and look good as well. And there it is with the epoxy on top, and also the brushable seam sealer all the way around that base. And I didn't spray up here because I'm going to be welding, so no sense in adding material that's going to get burned out. And then I had also had some epoxy left over, so I sprayed the inside of these upper half of the torque boxes, and also applied seam sealer in those corners. And I may add more later. I don't know, I have to see how things fit, but that's a good start. And now I'll top coat the epoxy and let that dry, and I'll be ready to install the upper half of the cowl. Well, I have the upper half of the cowl set in place, and you can see there's my weld pattern. And then up on top, where I did a different type of, I staggered the pattern to avoid the little retainer clips or retainer posts. I didn't want to get too close to those when it comes time to grind, so I left a little bigger space between those. I was able to put a pair of vice grips, C-clamps, into the left or the passenger side wiper hole, and was able to clamp the lower half of the cowl to the upper half. And then also this bigger C-clamp here comes underneath the dash, or through the dash where the glove box is, and clamps. And I'll be able to do the same thing on the other side. So I'll likely start on this side over here and weld this in, and then finish up on the other side. Alright, the cowl is in. And just a note, I think I mentioned I would start from one side and work across. What I actually did was work from the center, left and right, and that way it would lay down easier if there was any conflict with fitment. You don't want to try to push it all one direction. The holes line up really nice for the wiper holes. Even the holes up here are pretty close now. Sorry. And all I have left to do is blend it down. And I know somebody had asked me before about putting seam sealer, like if there was seam sealer between the two panels, and they may have done that when they produced these, and they used a spot welder. With doing this with a MIG, you're not going to be able to get away with that. It'll catch fire. I've seen somebody, and I wouldn't recommend this, but I saw them install the cowls with panel bond adhesive, and really you're not supposed to do that. Panel bond is not meant for any kind of structural area, and I would consider this structural in my opinion. But anyway, some people have used panel bond. Now my intention is, once I blend down these welds, and of course it'll get more, epoxy and stuff down the road, but this will all get seam sealer all the way around. and close up any of these gaps. Or, you know, I say gaps, there's no gaps, but close up any of these edges so that there's no way moisture can get in there. And beyond that, on the underside, I will also seam seal where the firewall, you know, meets the bottom of the cowl, and the same way with the side panels. So all that will get a layer of seam sealer as well. But I'm pretty happy with it. Things are coming along pretty nice, and the next phase will be installing the frame rails and all the other front components and suspension parts. So I'm looking forward to that. Yep, I think that's it. So this will be the end of this video, which I still believe is part 11, and the next one will be part 12. So again, thanks for being along for the ride, and thanks for watching.